The Florida Department of Financial Services, under Section 627.4554 of the Florida Statute, the Florida Annuity Suitability Law, amended in 2008, has announced new requirements involving suitability and replacements for fixed annuity sales to seniors. Seniors are defined as persons aged 65 or over. The new requirements, in other words, forms, adopted on October 28th, go into effect on December 25th, 2009. Merry Christmas. Some points that are common to both forms. These forms apply to deferred and immediate, individual or group annuity transactions, and in some cases will be in addition to, not instead of, any other required Florida or company-specific suitability and replacement disclosure forms. In other words, the suitability and replacement disclosure forms you and your clients now complete will still have to be completed, regardless of the client's age. Redundant in many ways, I know, but hopefully this will change as both the department and companies settle into this requirement. If the owner and annuitant are different, the forms are completed in the name of the owner. And if the owner is under age 65 and any of the annuitants are over age 65, then the owner is considered a senior consumer and the forms must be used. If the transaction occurs in Florida with a senior consumer resident of another state, the laws of Florida govern and the forms must be used. All questions must be completed. If the question does not apply, use not applicable or NA. If the client doesn't know the answer, enter unknown, and if the client refuses to divulge the information, enter unknown refused in those spaces. A copy of each form must be provided by the producer to the insurer within 10 days after the execution of the form and provided to the consumer no later than the date of delivery of the contract. Make sure to keep copies of all your application paperwork, especially the suitability replacement forms, and keep them for at least 5 years from the date of the transaction. Part of the new regulation requires periodic review of records to ensure compliance. If the transaction is reviewed by the department, is found not to be in compliance of these regulations, and the senior consumer harmed, the transaction could be rescinded with refund of premiums paid or accumulated value, whichever is greater, and the producer is subject to any applicable penalty under the Florida Insurance Code. For owners and annuitants under age 65, these forms are not required by the state. However, each company is incorporating these forms into their new business process differently. Make sure to give us a call for each company's specific requirements. The replacement requirement makes what was optional based on the applicant's needs now standard for replacement transactions involving senior consumers. Previously, a disclosure and comparison of annuity contracts form was required only if the owner initials the yes box in the Florida Notice to Applicant Regarding Replacement of Life Insurance form. This new regulation requires the completion of this form for all replacements, regardless of how the age 65 and over owner completes this form. Owners under age 65 can still opt out if they feel they don't need the comparison, but if they request a comparison, the company-specific comparison form is used. Also, the statute specifically reads, before executing the replacement or exchange of an annuity contract to a senior consumer. It makes no mention of replacing the cash value of a life insurance policy with an annuity. Finally, there is nothing in the rule prohibiting an insurer from adapting a form for its own use, subject to adhering to certain provisions and approval by the department. Some companies have adapted the form, while others have instituted the department-created form. Expecting no wide variance by any insurer, we will go over the standard state versions to help familiarize you with these new requirements. Let's take a look at the disclosure and comparison of annuity contracts form and start with a couple of pointers. All questions must be answered, even if the client refuses to divulge the information. You will want to enter unknown refused in those spaces. If the answer is just not known, answer unknown. This form must be completed for each existing annuity contract being replaced, including partial 1035 exchanges or qualified annuity transfers and rollovers. The producer must have reasonable grounds for believing the recommendation is suitable based on the facts disclosed by the consumer. The Department Disclosure and Comparison of Annuity Contract Form indicates the applicant and joint applicant must sign or at least initial and date each page of the form with the exception of page 2, which must be signed. However, some companies require all 4 pages be signed. Rather than trying to keep straight which company requires what, it's a good idea to get full signatures and dates on all 4 pages, regardless of the company. The company-specific Florida Notice to Applicant regarding replacement of life insurance form must still be completed and signed.